Hello and welcome to Amazing Stories from the Hood. My name is Brian, and this is episode 5, entitled Do You Believe in Destiny? Part 2. Our story opens with Denise, who was 8 years old the first time she was placed into foster care after her mother was arrested for drugs, and is now 12 years old, having just been given the news by Gary that he no longer wishes to speak with her. It's important to know that Denise's mother was an only child born to a prominent family. Her father, a college professor, and her mother, a lawyer, both of whom were respected in their fields, and who maintained high expectations for Denise's mother. It was those very expectations that caused Denise's mother to rebel. Feeling that she would never be able to live up to those expectations, she turned to the streets. All throughout her rebelliousness, however, it should be noted that she maintained a relationship with her father, one of Daddy's little girl. And so, when in the 11th grade she turned up pregnant with Denise, she chose to move in with the boy who had gotten her pregnant and try and develop a life with him. She was madly in love. So Denise's mother received support from her father against her mother's wishes and behind her mother's back. It did not take very long, however, for the relationship to end, and the boy ended up leaving Denise's mother, pregnant, never to be seen or heard from again. Unable to manage her affairs, Denise's mother moved back home with her parents. During the time she lived at home while pregnant, Denise's mother and her mother constantly bickered. But when Denise's mother became physically violent with her mother, the accumulation of stress from the previous conflicts caused her father to have a heart attack. He remained paralyzed and unresponsive and on life support for the remainder of her pregnancy. And while the conflicts between Denise's mother and her mother came to an end, the conflict between Denise's mother and Denise began. Denise's mother began to blame her pregnancy for the loss of her boyfriend and the loss of her father. And when Denise was born, it was Denise's grandmother who could see that if she did not intervene, Denise would not survive. So it was Denise's grandmother who raised her until she passed away when Denise was 7 years old. With the passing of Denise's grandmother, she now had to withstand the abuse from her mother without the protection of her grandmother. It was because she was talking on the phone for hours with Gary that Denise's mother's resentment was triggered and intensified. So at 12 years old, Denise had no illusions about her relationship with her mother and was willing to withstand the abuse for Gary. So when Gary said he no longer wanted to talk to her, you can imagine the rug was pulled out from beneath her feet. So while her relationship with Gary had come to an end, the intensified resentment from her mother had just begun. Redoubling her efforts to get out from underneath her mother, Denise began to excel in school. And because of her first experience with a boyfriend being Gary and her mother's reaction, Denise decided at 12 that she would have no more boyfriends. At 14 years old and in the 9th grade, Denise began fast-tracking for college classes. And by turning 15 and in the 10th grade, near the middle of the semester, Denise had acquired enough credits to graduate. Around the same time Gary was running away from home, Denise was planning on her graduation. After Denise graduated and was put out by her mother and made her way to the shelter, she was befriended by a woman who had recently divorced and had a spare room at her home because her son, some months earlier, had run away. When Denise got to her home and saw the pictures of her son and realized it was Gary, she explained to Gary's mother, who fainted. Over the next few months, Denise and Gary's mother, who rejected their meeting as mere coincidence and instead both accepted it as God's glory, formed an unbreakable bond. Every day they spent hours talking with one another, enjoying each other's company, and rejuvenating each other's outlook on life. Denise came to realize that her mother viewed her pregnancy with Denise as the reason her life went down, and that Gary's mother looked at her pregnancy with Gary as the reason her life went up. And Gary's mother, in dealing with Denise, realized that she had fallen into depression after her divorce and losing her son, and had chosen to take a job at the shelter as a way of hiding from the rest of her life. Gary's mother decided to return to attending church and introduced Denise to the congregation. and both were asked to testify before the church of their story. Gary's mother, when her confidence returned, applied for better jobs than working at the shelter and got a job as a paralegal for one of the lawyers in the church. And Denise, who had finally gotten the one thing out of life that she felt she needed, which was a mother, she no longer felt the need for academics and had to be encouraged by Gary's mother to apply for colleges. Denise, who with Gary's mother's help applied for many colleges, Gary's mother especially recommended to Denise to apply for a college in her mother's hometown because while she was an orphan herself, Gary's mother expressed to Denise the need to build connections with family. And when the acceptance letters started rolling in, Denise was encouraged by Gary's mother to attend the college in her mother's hometown, which Denise did. When she arrived at college and was reintroduced to her mother's family, she was warmly received and immediately presented with a job by her great aunt and uncle as a tutor. Denise settled into college and stayed in contact with Gary's mother, calling her every day. Afterwards, Denise met with her great aunt and uncle to go over the background of the student she was supposed to tutor. As she sat in their office going over the file of the student, which was Gary's roommate, she saw the other file with a photo of what looked like it could be Gary, but she wasn't sure. She asked about the other boy and was told that he was the roommate to the student she was supposed to tutor, but that he didn't need tutoring. He was a very bright young man. Then Denise asked, "Is his name Gary?" And her aunt and uncle replied, "Yes." Now it was Denise's turn, and so Denise fainted. Denise came to on the couch in the office amidst a flurry of emergency medical technicians, her aunt and uncle frantic. She sat up and explained that she was fine and that she was overcome by what she had just realized. She explained that she needed to talk to her aunt and uncle as soon as the emergency technicians left. After they were gone, Denise explained her story to her great aunt and uncle, who then told Denise that maybe she was wrong because the boy had told them that he was an orphan and had escaped from an orphanage. Denise remained unconvinced, but held out to the possibility that she could be wrong, and instead of telling Gary's mother, she decided to write to Gary's mother and mail the letter instead. When Denise arrived at the tutoring session and the boy that could be Gary opened the door, she was confirmed, but he showed no recognition of her. Denise, holding out that maybe it's not the same Gary, decided not to say anything. Instead, she got on the phone with Gary's mother and suggested that Gary's mother come down and see for herself. This brings to an end of part 2.